At 79, Barry Gibb finally tells the truth about Cliff Richard. Barry Gibb was born Barry Allen Crompton Gibb on September 1st, 1946 in Douglas on the Isle of Man. He was the second of 5 children in the musically gifted Gibb family. His parents, Hugh and Barbara Gibb, nurtured a home where creativity and music flowed freely, shaping Barry's early fascination with melody and harmony. From a young age, Barry displayed an extraordinary ability to craft songs that combined raw emotion with intricate structure, a gift that would define his career for over 6 decades. When the Gibb family moved to Manchester, England, and later to Redcliffe, Queensland, Australia, Barry's musical ambitions grew stronger, finding expression alongside his younger twin brothers Maurice and Robin. The formation of the Bee Gees was nothing short of destiny. In the late 1950s, Barry, Robin, and Maurice began performing together, developing their signature harmonies and unique vocal blend that would later captivate the world. Initially performing in small Australian venues, the trio's break came in the mid-1960s when they caught the attention of influential DJ Bill Gates and producer Robert Stigwood, who brought them to England. From there, their ascent was meteoric. The Bee Gees became synonymous with chart-topping hits that spanned genres. From the tender ballads of the 1960s like To Love Somebody in Massachusetts to the groundbreaking disco anthems of the 1970s, such as Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love. Barry, as the eldest brother and the creative leader, was instrumental in defining the group's sound. His falsetto became iconic, his songwriting timeless, and production techniques revolutionary. The 1970s marked Barry Gibb's golden era, as he helped usher in the disco revolution that transformed the global music landscape. The Bee Gees' contribution to the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of all time, earning them Grammy Awards and cementing their legacy as cultural icons. Beyond his success with the Bee Gees, Barry's talent extended far beyond the trio. He wrote and produced hits for a host of artists, including Barbra Streisand, Guilty, Diana Ross, Chain Reaction and Kenny Rogers, and Dolly Parton, Islands in the Stream. His uncanny ability to adapt to changing musical trends while sustaining the emotional heart of his compositions made him one of the most versatile figures in music history. But Barry's journey was not without its share of heartbreak and hardship. The deaths of his brothers, Andy in 1988, Maurice in 2003, and Robin in 2012, left deep emotional scars. Each loss represented not only the passing of a family member, but also the fading of a creative bond which had defined his whole life. Despite these tragedies, Barry carried on and honored their memory with a continued dedication to music. His later solo works, such as Now, 2016, reflect a more introspective and personal side of his artistry, revealing the depth of his emotions and the wisdom of a man who has seen both unimaginable success and profound loss. Barry has often spoken about feeling the presence of his brothers while performing, suggesting his connection with them is one that transcends death, a bond eternally sealed through song. Barry Gibb's legacy in the music industry is immeasurable. He has written or co-written 16 number-1 hits in the United States. A very small handful of artists can boast of such a capability, and his influence cuts through generations and genres. Inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame, and knighting by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018 for services to music and charity mark milestones that speak as much to his humanitarian spirit as to his artistic excellence. His unmistakable falsetto, deep sentiments, and soulful deliveries continue to inspire scores of musicians and songwriters around the world. Barry Gibb's romantic life has been as eventful and enduring as his legendary career. From his first marriage to Maureen Bates and later finding lifelong companionship with Linda Gray, his devoted wife of more than 5 decades, each relationship marked an important chapter in his personal evolution, which paralleled the challenges of fame, the power of love, and stability that ultimately allowed him to thrive as a man and artist. Barry Gibb married Maureen Bates back in 1966, when he was still just a young man on the cusp of his international career. The Bee Gees were at an early formation stage, and Barry continued to juggle the pressures of an emerging music career with the responsibilities that came with being married. Maureen provided important emotional support and comfort during those uncertain early years when the Gibb brothers were struggling to carve out a niche for themselves. The two shared a rather modest, private life away from the glare of show business. However, as fame began to reshape the world around Barry, the demands of his rapidly rising career inevitably placed an additional strain on their relationship. The whirlwind of touring, recording, and public attention made it increasingly difficult for the young couple to maintain some sense of normality. After 4 years together, their marriage ended in divorce in 1970. Though their union was brief, it represented perhaps a very pivotal stage in Barry's life, a time of self-discovery and emotional growing pains that came with entering adulthood under bright lights of fame. His marriage to Maureen, though short-lived, taught Barry important lessons about love, loyalty, and the many sacrifices associated with success. That same year, fate intervened in the most profound way when Barry met Linda Gray, who would become not only his wife but also his anchor through decades of triumph and tragedy. Linda, a former Miss Edinburgh and Scottish beauty queen, had a quiet strength and grace that immediately made her appeal to Barry. The two met during the early 1970s meteoric rise of BG, with the brothers transforming from pop artists with promise into international sensations. Barry was drawn instantly to Linda's poise and down-to-earth nature, which provided such refreshing contrast to the chaos and glamour of the entertainment world. Their romance blossomed quickly, and by September 1st, 1970, they were married, a union destined to become one of the most enduring and admired marriages in show business history. Throughout his marriage, Linda Gray was the steadfast rock on which Barry built his life. She was not only his love, but also his safe haven, through whom he faced the pressures of fame, the intensity of family relationships, and the creative demands of living up to the Bee Gees' incredible legacy. Together, they created a family that reflected the depths of their connection, raising 5 children: Stephen, Ashley, Travis, Michael, and Alexandra. Their home life, at times touched by the struggles of fame and loss, was deeply rooted in love, mutual respect, and spiritual connection. At every major transition, Linda stood by Barry. From the Bee Gees' dizzying success during the era of disco to the devastating loss of his brothers Morris and Robin, she stood by him through the battles he fought with exhaustion, grief, and the emotional weight of having outlived his siblings, who had shared his musical journey. Barry has said in interviews that Linda emotionally and spiritually saved him. He has spoken candidly of how her love anchored him and gave him the endurance when his world appeared to fall apart. "Linda is my rock," he once said, emphasizing that her loyalty and devotion kept him from losing himself in fame's darker temptations. While many celebrity marriages have faded under the weight of pressure and public scrutiny, Barry and Linda's union endured a rare example of genuine partnership in an industry notorious for fleeting relationships. Their love story, which began more than half a century ago, continues to thrive today as they enjoy their later years together in relative peace, often retreating to their home in Miami, surrounded by family and memories. After years of friendship, admiration, and sometimes even a little distance between them, Barry Gibb has finally broken his silence regarding what he honestly thinks about the legend of British pop, Cliff Richard. Now 79 years old, the last surviving be reflected with honesty and emotion on a relationship that has spanned more than half a century in the ever-evolving world of music. For decades, there was speculation by devoted fans about the nature of their friendship two of the most influential voices in pop history, whose careers often crossed, yet whose personalities seemed to come from different musical worlds. Barry, not one to speak hastily, has chosen this point in his life to finally tell the truth of what Cliff Richard really meant to him and how their paths shaped one another. Cliff was one of the first artists who made me believe that you could be decent and famous at the same time. Barry began reflecting on their early encounters during the swinging 60s. At a time when many artists were caught up in the chaos of fame, Cliff's poise, humility, and unwavering moral compass stood out. He never lost his faith, even when the business tried to break him. I respected that for Barry, who had seen firsthand the temptations and tragedies that came with superstardom. Cliff's steadiness was something rare, a kind of quiet rebellion against the darker side of show business. Barry also recalled how Cliff's success paved the way for British artists like himself and his brothers to dream bigger. When we were still trying to find our sound, Cliff had already conquered the charts. He showed us that you didn't have to be American to make it big. You could be from England or from anywhere, and the world would still listen. This acknowledgement is particularly meaningful, as the Bee Gees themselves would later become global icons, helping to define not only pop and disco music, but a cultural era. To Barry, Cliff Richard's early success helped tear down the barriers that once separated British musicians from the international stage. Yet Barry's revelations weren't all about admiration. He also discussed the silent gap that had grown between them through the years, a gap that has intrigued many observers. We aren't those friends that call each other every day, but when we met, there was always respect. Sometimes, life just takes you in different directions. He spoke of how the Bee Gees' rise to fame in the 1970s with hits like Staying Alive, and how Deep Is Your Love placed him into a whirlwind of touring, recording, and media frenzy that made personal relationships difficult to maintain. When you're on top of the world, you think you have time for everyone, but fame moves faster than friendship. Still, Gibb made a point of explaining that his admiration for Cliff Richard never wavered. What I've always admired most about Cliff is that he stayed true to himself. He didn't follow trends. He made his own. Even when the world mocked him for being clean-cut or religious, he stood tall. That takes courage. Barry's words carried the tone of a man who understood all too well the cost of authenticity in an industry built on image and reinvention. He hinted that Cliff's ability to balance fame with faith was something he envied, calling him a man who never let the stage change the soul. In one of the more touching moments, Barry reflected on the bond of survival that unites artists of their generation. We've both seen friends go too soon. Maurice, Robin, Andy, all my brothers. They were my life. And Cliff has lost people, too. When you've been in this business as long as we have, you realize that just surviving it is a miracle. His voice, filled with quiet melancholy, turned reflective. Cliff's still here, still singing, still smiling. That's strength. That's faith in motion. Gibb's comments also revealed a deeper sense of kinship rooted in endurance and legacy. We're both from an era where music came from the heart, not the machine. What I love about Cliff is that he still believes in melody, in lyrics that mean something. That's rare today. He described how the two occasionally exchanged notes of encouragement over the years, and how seeing Cliff continue to tour inspired him to keep performing even after the loss of his brothers. In the end, Barry's truth about Cliff Richard wasn't about controversy or confession. It was about gratitude. It was a heartfelt acknowledgement of one legend to another, born from decades of silent respect. People always want drama, but the truth is simpler. Cliff's a good man, one of the best. He never gave up, and he never gave in. That's what I'll always admire about him. At 79, Barry Gibb speaks not as superstar chasing headlines, but as a survivor, paying tribute to a peer who shares his rare understanding of the highs and lows of fame. His words remind us that behind the bright lights and screaming fans, there exists a quiet fraternity of artists who endured, evolved, and remained true to their hearts. For Barry Gibb, telling the truth about Cliff Richard was not an act of revelation.